Hello there. To say that I have felt chills in recent playthroughs when going into certain horror games would be an unfortunate truth unless it came down to a little game called Purgatory, the second one to be exact. The original is small and lightly covers some of the lore points besides being a run-of-the-mill RPG maker game, but Purgatory 2 takes this and runs it up plenty of notches to create a horror fest I have loved ever since its inception. But before I delve into the thicket of what this video or what Purgatory is about, I recommend that you check out both the first and second game so that nothing gets spoiled for you in advance after you're too deep and realise you would have enjoyed the game without spoilers. If you're unable to play the game or just feel like being a lazy sod, then I recommend you check out Manly Badass Hero as he covers both games alongside all of their endings, so nothing is left out. I'll be borrowing bits and pieces from his series anyways to properly show how the demons are in action, to properly demonstrate how they interact with their surroundings or the player characters themselves. At some point I hope to indulge in it for the camera once I've forgotten enough so that I get spooked whenever the scares do happen, as I'd like to be as genuine as possible for the recording, which is why I won't over-explain more than I need to. However, before I indulge you all in the information that could save you a painful trial and error process, why don't you subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for when I go through more devilish creatures. Rest assured I will still be making commentary as I have done in the past, but for now I'm building cases in the background and waiting for something of note to come stumbling into the light. I understand a few people may be reluctant to give this new branch of content a chance, but it is something I wish to pursue for now, and I'm sure things will eventually balance out when I can find an adequate groove. For now, we are still homing in on that goal of 1,000 subscribers, with the usual goods being not far from being reached as well. That aside, we have quite the report regarding these vile creatures, so it is best to start with what we know of them. Just so you're up to speed with what a demon is in this universe, they are humans that have been tested on constantly with chemicals to contort them into hellish red beasts that hardly resemble their former self anymore, usually taking what is known as demon cells to properly change them into such monstrous forms. However, they deviate from being demon types, or D-types, when only in the process of turning into a demon, and thus would be dubbed a subject type, or S-type, instead, since they are still partly human. A lesser known variation is present too, despite not receiving a classification in game, though I'll expand on that now for the ill-informed. Before going to demons and mutants that are the start of the game, we should talk about the first threat to the main character, which are the hell beast spiders that were birthed from one of the many experiments done by Lobelia. Hints of this can be found in the first Purgatory game, actually, as the small black spider follows Henry around and eats the corpses that are strewn around the area until getting squished or becoming too big to the point of going after live prey instead. Otherwise, they don't really have any real input during the first game. This all changes as they get pushed to the forefront for the conflict starting in Purgatory 2 as M-622 or B_spiders get released into the capital, leading to Ebel, the protagonist, being made to travel another way, then being a threat to Emma as the former comes back to try and save her. Afterwards they get shunned to the background as obstacles that need to be slashed through or avoided whilst working around the city or in the labs below the surface. Even in their own layer, they aren't any more than cowards in the presence of Henry's demonic aura, which isn't necessarily a bad thing since it helps raise her up as a badass slayer character. In such a nest, you also find M-625 or Y_spiders, which aren't much different in how their real-life counterpart, the Argeo-ammonia, appears or acts, as they remain stationary until food comes rolling along. Only Ebel is far too cautious to be caught by such a thing once he spots it. Just as a side note, there is supposedly another, going by the name of M-701 G_spider, which is supposed to be the nest's leader, though it receives barely a minute of screen time despite being such a high-ranking spider. That being said though, it isn't like we need another big spider boss since we have a certain D-type to thank instead. It is wise to make a separation between an imperfect demon and a perfect demon, as they are largely different with how they operate, with them being given descriptions to show how they differ. I shall read the descriptions of an imperfect demon, then a perfect demon, so you can tell as well. Imperfect demons are demonified humans with flaws that leave them incomplete. They have a shorter lifespan compared to their perfected counterparts. They typically live up to 200 years at best under good circumstances, but D-029 is the exception to this. Their bodies have undergone mutation and they require sustenance in order to live. However, imperfect demons also lose their reasoning and judgmental abilities, their ability to hold information and memories, and the ability to feel fear. They can absorb and combine with other living organisms, or even grow into the size of a giant. On the other hand, perfect demons are demonified humans who are beyond comparison, whole and complete. They have a long lifespan and will not die from natural causes. Depending on the individual, they can amass immense strength. They also possess supernatural abilities, although this only affects those who are ranked as a greater demon or higher. They require no sustenance in order to live, but they have no issue with eating regardless. Perfect demons can choose to retain their reasoning and judgmental abilities, their ability to hold information and memories, and any other parts of their humanity if they so wish. They also feel little to no fear. Perfect demons have a perpetual state of health, and they are not affected by poisoning, radiation, diseases, brainwashing, etc. They do not require sleep, but they do not have a problem with sleeping. This only affects those who are ranked as a mid-level demon or higher, and depending on their individual, they may have a penchant for combat. As you can see, the two separate the notion of being uncontrolled and controlled, as the imperfect demon lack the ability to think rationally, or to a degree where they can even consider something to be due to how they have mutated. Perfect demons, however, are as expected, with them having near to no weaknesses and being unaffected by ailments which could cripple other people, but the only thing stopping them from going feral would be themselves now, though I think it should be noted that the imperfect demons will vary a lot more than perfect demons, as you'll likely see soon. D-033 is the most persistent, most dangerous, and most resistant of all the demons you come across throughout the game, since it will constantly get back up no matter how many times it gets struck down. After combining a spider, human, and demonic weapon in a failed experiment, this abomination was brought into the world and currently has no way of being taken out either, with the durability to survive high-scale bomb attacks and direct blows from perfect demons such as Enri. The best you can do is pin it on its back, then make a break for it, because even then it can only be held for so long, which shows during gameplay as every effort is made to stop it, yet the thing continues to thrash around. Obviously, it would instill a sense of dread into both characters and players alike when they come to realize they only have so long before they are getting tracked down once more. Even the final encounter leaves a sense of unease, as Neun, of whom I'll expand upon later, raises the possibility that the thing just got catapulted down the hole shown earlier, then sealed over with the debris to recover. With such a beast being unpredictable, it helps to balance out the raw power that gets brought in by Enri, and doesn't leave encounters being just about hitting it a few times, and instead a test of the quick thinking from the cast to distance it, or a show of courage to help the others out. Ultimately, due to how it will be foreshadowed after the first encounter and how often you're forced against 033, it never feels like the battles get tiring due to how unique they come off as, and don't feel overtly pointless either, since some occasions grant rest or help build tension when you hear it approaching out of the blue. In this section I have mainly grouped together both D-013 and D-015 due to them being similar in a couple of ways, whether lore-wise or how they appear in game, since they work primarily in order to chase the cast along an alleyway or corridor. The chase doesn't alter much besides incorporating different environmental obstacles and ways in which the flames encase the demon's bodies. That being said, it doesn't really need to do much when the adrenaline is pumping and you want to put as much ground between the cast and whatever is trying to devour them. The differences really come through regarding design and background, since D-013 is a severed head with legs that scurries after the group once being released from containment. To contrast, D-015 is a demon that was designed to kill other S-types themselves, so it probably mutated on its own from consuming so many demon cells as a result. That being said, they both hold a vulnerability to heat, which has been one of the effective ways to kill a demon alongside starving and sheer power. Despite being such easy kills though, it shows how well Lobelia are getting at crafting demonified humans that become leagues more powerful than their regular body could demonstrate, making the reality of an evil, perfect demon even more terrifying when the likes of D-033 exist in an imperfect form. The chase scenes as a whole work perfectly to ease the player into the concept of D-types by giving them a chance to understand the markings of what makes them unique despite looking the same, such as D-033's concurrent screaming being a trademark of its character. Whilst with D-013 or D-015, it is the fact it is a screen scroller instead of being an open space to run around, with the former being more difficult to traverse as it is faced later in the game. At least this probably demonstrates how they can present unique threats or scenarios despite holding the same element of fear, though it isn't like a human such as Ebel can do much with only his intellect at hand. Probably the most fleshed out of the bunch would be D-029, or as she is better known as, Neun. Contrary to what you get told on the lead up to your first altercation with Neun, she turns out to be surprisingly useful in your escape of the labs, as we come to find out she doesn't want to follow in Oliver's orders to wipe out the humans above, yet had to maintain a veil of idiocy since she was far more intelligent than what was expected. This boils down to one of her many powers to absorb memories through the consumption of human brains, as long as trauma isn't too severe, not to mention the many dumb-eating monsters that do her bidding like a hive mind, being able to change cells to match the DNA of a person to replace limbs, or create monstrous extremities that are able to restrain larger foes. Even then, I'm scratching the surface of what could be done. Despite everything though, she is pivotal in many different ways that affect the plot, whether being raised to cause massive destruction in order to collect research for Oliver, who is just that petty. Alongside this comes a conflict of her own interest with her creator, since she doesn't want the deaths of millions after making contact with living humans for once, which leads into her exploring far past her chambers and learning stuff that wouldn't be available even after consuming the scientist's memories around them. Even then, her knowledge on demons and being able to read them is what further pushes her usefulness in order to complete certain endings or evade certain death against oncoming foes. Surprisingly, she's the key factor in taking down Oliver too, with the disabling of his body coming from her parasitizing his robotics, allowing for the death of her creator and removing one of the bigger threats from the situation. Ultimately, she is a utility knife in demon form, and sides with Ebel's group. Besides the ones that were mentioned prior, there are plenty others to go over, but they really lack any substance besides what is told to us when interacting with their glass boxes and never really get shown again in the story, since by the time they appear, the end of the game is fast approaching too. That being said, I'm still going to go over a couple that stuck out to me. D-005 is a demon found in the arena area, and acts sort of like a retaliator when approached, so the group are fine when interacting since there is no fighting to be had, but instead a ribbon is bestowed to it. Considering it is technically a girl, according to Nama, it probably appreciated it a lot more than could be expressed. Alongside this is a tidbit found in the game folder stating that Lobelia could have found what they were looking for if they actually gave 005 a human body instead, since she would have become a perfect demon, which lines up accurately when finding notes of higher intelligence and strength is also made a note of. D-004 appears as a hanged man away from the other demons below in the same area, which is more than likely due to the aura it maintains when others approach it, causing intense unease that goes right through the glass of its cell, causing the group to go on high guard, despite the lack of any threat coming towards them. Despite having such a minuscule appearance though, screenshots from the new Purgatory games suggest that 004 will have a more important role as it confronts a set of characters that have yet to be identified just yet. D-044 is the beating heart of the underground lab, as blood is constantly funneled out of its spherical body, only to have it regenerated instantly due to the very nature of its being, and subsequently is where all the blood in the facility comes from. Without a continuous flow of blood going through it, it is very likely that a lot of the D-types will perish from a lack of a red river flowing in to feed them, and it is likely the flow of corpses dried up also when the explosion drew in unwanted attention as well. As a result, when the heart of D-044 stopped beating, it sentenced the majority of the demons to drawn-out death or cannibalism at the hands of the stronger demons. Besides acting as a good opportunity to give insight into demons that have yet to play a role in the story, these creatures act as a vessel for Nama's ability to create unique entities that serve a multitude of purposes, from infinite blood to emotional manipulation. This is what we have seen on the surface as well, with more potentially beneath, that which we can see, as Lobelia continues to experiment on those that are applicable, whether to generate imperfect or perfect demons. With the next Purgatory game still in development though, it leaves us to further analyse or pick apart that which we have already been presented with, since even that which is found near the end in their own cages have things which usually get overlooked in favour of constant threats that appear more prominently, though the D-types will always play second fiddle to the form which usually comes first. Unlike with D-types, S-types are typically just the base and are humans that will one day become demons with enough training or experiments. However, they have proven to be less than adequate at this point so far, as we have only a few details regarding them. From the surface looking down, it shows that all the subjects tend to be serial killers when they get recruited into the Lobelia Corporation, before having deadlines that need to be reached before being granted a D-type designator. So far, we know only of 4 S-types for certain, which are more than likely all deceased at this point due to Enri's interference, or Lobelia trying to cover their tracks before everything got exposed to the common folk. S-001 was a simple person who became a serial killer before Lobelia intervened and brought them into their facility to subtly experiment on the person, which would begin to remove their emotions and intellect. This would eventually lead to the subject being a monster with half a mind and only an urge to kill or consume when the opportunities presented itself to them. They were human, no more. That being said, they fell below Lobelia's expectations despite all that came before, meaning that they never had the chance to develop past an S-type, and gained their current title instead. Despite all their efforts, they ended up looking like any other D-type anyways, with how their flesh is mangled and they're more enlarged to try to devour their prey within the lab, as they barely retain the figure of a man. Eventually this came to an end when they tried to consume one of Lobelia's leaders and got his head blown apart instead. S-003, also known as the Butcher, actually made an on-screen appearance as the main threat of the first Purgatory game and was close to achieving his demon form at a kill streak of 19,700 out of 20,000, but was cut short thanks to Enri's intervention. Instead, she ended up bonding with the axe to become a perfect demon, which left the subject as another failed experiment after being exterminated outside of his own lair when trying to get the jump on the former, likely getting the closest to becoming a demon amongst all the other subjects. S-004, it was likely the first time a human tried to get turned into a demon, though it was a failure, which led to the creation of D-015 instead, which turned out to be a decent hunter and killer for other S-types. This is likely why it was deployed alongside the B_spiders to hunt down a certain subject, but instead was killed after being blown to pieces as his body burned to ashes, after an explosion went off point blank in front of it, thus making it a notable inclusion despite being an imperfect demon. S-005 is the last subject on the list, but is one of the more mundane ones, as they never advanced past their initial induction into the Lobelia Incorporation after finding out what was going to happen, which is why they attempted to warn others. They had insider information surrounding the true aim of Lobelia after all, so it would be wise to spread the word whilst they could, but it would be a fruitless endeavour, as a clutter of B_spiders and D-015 would be deployed to kill them first. This led to the whole slum district being ravaged, but the attack proved successful, though not before S-005 got to have a word with Henry first. Though everyone seems to follow the same course of being a mass murderer that eventually gets filled with demon cells or getting killed, it is nice to finally have some sort of insight into what actually is the process behind these creatures. Thinking that these were just humans only to be morphed into red fleshy monstrosities with unsightly exteriors gives an unsettling undertone with those that could be infected or have been infected, which we know of, or even that which we don't quite know yet. Instilling fear into people who have come to like Henry due to how she could eventually turn into another of these demons if she starts to unfold her humanity, until being a beast of violence and death. Nevertheless, this has yet to be concluded. With the breakdown over with, I hope it enlightened you as to how diverse every obstacle under Lobelia's rule is and how much effort goes into crafting the demons that pop up along the way. Ultimately, it paints a picture of how devious a corporation is, whilst placing speed bumps to rattle the main cast as they go along, to the point of every corner holding a mystery, with potential benefits if cards are played correctly. From D-029's assistance to D-033's constant chase for a morsel that likely isn't worth its time, it is rather varied to the point that anything can happen. It gets even more interesting when you notice a background element such as the S-types, which are ever so likely to bloom at any moment, only to be decimated at any given moment, with how the world seems to handle them as weapons more than humans. There are a couple of demons I neglected to mention due to not wanting to spoil everything, whilst wanting you to explore what is below the surface as well due to how things come together. A bloodied world with many more trying to contribute to the plot is certainly something that a horror fan can indulge into if they have the time to enjoy the gory or contorted creations that get risen from the world of demons, as I have done so prior to now. Like I mentioned at the start, I should eventually get around to posting my own playthrough of the games, but I want to have some form of written essay to break the game up a bit. In any case, I've been VincentSkullMan, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully.